Always a pleasure. So, Open Society Foundations, I'm based in Berlin. I lead our programming in Europe and Central Asia. And I'm a proud current, but also former, both in title and form, supporter to think tanks. Actually, I created a special body within Open Society Foundation there for many years. And thank you for Kike and others for giving me this opportunity. It's also a good reconnection with the world here. Also, probably important to mention, I'm a proud Southern and Eastern European, although I reside in Berlin, which is labeled as a non-German, but yet the epicenter of power in Europe. Now, it was a super entertaining session. I'm not gonna sing. I was going to ask you to close your eyes, but it will be a very dangerous proposition in the afternoon. But I will ask you for a really 15 seconds of de-think tank yourself. De-think tanking yourself. I just want to ask you, find a spot somewhere in this room, fixate your eyesight, and think of one person that you can choose to which you believe your work helps their life to be better. Just for 15 seconds. Don't think about research and everything else. If I continue saying not to think, I will fail lake of tests. So because there is no anti-narrative. So think of a person that your work contributes to help. 15 seconds. Just take a spot. A person. It can be your grandma too. So why I need this? I want really briefly to distance ourselves just from the daily grind and from all the sort of challenges that you face. Super important conversation. We'll come back to that. Early on, a colleague from there says like, hey, wait a second. One of the things is that we think tanks have to really consider what's happening in the world, what problem, what is really fundamental as the problems, what's the wood for the trees that we try to plant. And that's also my intention. I would like to take you on a short journey that will have a constant change, that will move through lies and authoritarianism to new models of societal change. If you're difficult with abstraction, which should not be, let's say we start from a male character, Heraclicus, probably some smart woman said this, but it was ascribed ancient Greece, so to a man, to Hannah Arendt, to Mariana Mazzucato. Now, why? Why all these three? First of all, I will use the only constant in life is change. That's what has been ascribed to Heraclicus. Just to use it to say, okay, many of you mentioned this morning, change is constant, let's adapt to it. But in a way, let's see maybe what's our new constant. Then I would like to move to what Hannah Arendt really powerfully reminded us in her seminal book on totalitarianism. Earlier we heard on tyranny with Timothy Snyder, a bit of a newer, updated version, but really what's at the core, and that's lies, which is very opposite to evidence, add these systems and how that affects us. And I would like to finish on a more positive note. That's why I took Mazzucato, not because it's my favorite model, but because actually she's one of the very sort of the fresh economists that tries to look at how capitalism, and I really underline, I work for a foundation that wants to help democracy flourish, but I really want to emphasize how capitalism needs first fixing. Now, let's go very, very quickly, and I apologize, I will rush through a bit in order to have also some time for interaction. So first, what is the, Kike was asking, and in the briefing they said, oh, political uncertainty, and I was like, wait a second, there are some things which are absolutely certain. And I try to put them down for myself. One thing is certain, that first time in the history of humankind, we face a limit. And that's the limit of our planet. We cannot use it or abuse it as well as we want because it may burn. And that's actually very interesting. And this is still, for some people, it's not, the day of reckoning has not come to acknowledge this, but in principle, all the science, all the evidence that many of you also work on can attest this. And that's actually a very clear certainty that we face. The second thing is the certainty of multipolar world. I work on Europe, Eurocentric. Oh my goodness, we are so incurably. But if we do not cure ourselves and we do not start thinking in the lenses of the multipolar world, probably our analysis will miss a lot of important points. Now, why I'm mentioning all this? I'm mentioning because with the sort of multipolar world, there will be opportunities, but also there will be a lot of challenges. If we talk about post-coldish multipolar, or like a Cold War type of multipolar world, I see a lot of threat to some, if not all, Western European research organizations to be taken as hostages and not even allowed to act as bridges, but rather as supporters and fans to one side, because there are a lot of politicians who will not take them as that. And that's, you know, just think think of a scenario in which there is an escalation of US-China and think what a US think tank can do and cannot do in that constellation. And especially for many of us who come from smaller countries, you think like in an absence of power, in trying to balance, what can a think tank do, especially if you have a at-home authoritarian government? So the multipolar world will be a certainty in which a lot of people will have to adapt, including from where they take the money. Speaking of money, there is a certainty of further concentration of wealth. The rich people have got incredibly rich. And that is, you know, that is Forbes who traces this, you know, 12% of GDP, 12 trillion is in the hands of really just a couple of thousand of billionaires. Now, if you simply use the metrics, if you adjust for inflation and value from 1998 to today, you come up still with actually a whooping amount of 9 trillion in assets with billionaires. Why is that important? It's important in societal terms. What does it mean of who has the power? But also it's important for the think tankers, because as Russell Mead said many years ago in a New York Times interview, think tankers are cheap. He said, I cost, and he was a person who worked for a Council of Foreign Relations. I don't mean to insult here, just don't get me wrong. But he said, like, oh, I cost as a sort of an average wedding ring to a millionaire. I don't want to even think what am I in the fraction of a billionaire. And why I'm saying this, because actually, let's not forget, when we talk about billionaires, we have to also not forget, it's not only about the riches. We sometimes look at this from a benevolent side, but let's not forget that a lot of those billions are actually billions who have been acquired from rent-seeking, meaning from extortion, either in both in authoritarian and democratic countries. And one thing which is also typical for this type of setting is actually buying media and buying smart people to be part of the ecosystem that is your defense. And that's really important to think about that. So not only as a society, but also for the future of the industry. And last but not the least, there is a certainty that we are entering in an era of technological advancement, but I would add a new thing combined with neuroscience. And that you know, everybody great for, you know, thumbs up in a way or thumbs down for GPT. But let's not forget that with the neuroscience and with all the manipulation that already happens, and some regulators, like on this continent, are trying to fight, when you get the manipulation of a lot of things, on how you buy, how Amazon sets your price, how you trace, how your body is followed, and basically your camera knows better about you, and so on. That's actually not only amazingly important for what's happening to us as human beings, but also what happens to you as researchers. Now, I said the second thing is lies. Why lies are important? Hannah Arendt wrote, "Dictatorship is a society of lies." And one of the key problems of such places is that everything becomes fake. Truth does not matter anymore, and there is no objective science. And then if I combine that with the trend of where democracy goes in this world, exactly goes in that direction. And if you talk about, look, here we are all diehards about evidence making and whatnot, well, actually the global trend has already gone in the opposite direction for far. What do you do in that type of circumstance? And when I say what do, I know that some of you actually have a very concrete answer because you operate in that kind of environment. But that answer has to be not only shared, but actually actively discussed. In that case, we have to look at the fabric of the society. Even the most affluent democracies suffer from polarization. And polarization has is only a tip of the iceberg. Actually, polarization, what has done is that it has destroyed the places in which you thrive the best. These are the places of debate. These are the places where you can have a respectable debate with people that you disagree. The current politics takes no hostages and says, like, are you with me or are you without me? And how we can recreate those places. I think that's really important. And last but not least about this, because at the bottom of the lies and the fears sits an industry that thrives not on evidence, not on data, but on feelings. And this is not to evoke Barbara Streisand and say feelings, not more than feelings, but we often forget that. And I'm not saying that you should trade in feelings, but I'm saying you have to factor those both as a subject of the research, but also as an outcome of what kind of feeling that produces. I'm sure that very rarely ask ourselves, will my report produce any feeling? And to whom? You always ask what kind of an outcome it will produce in terms of number and hard decision. While the political space that you observe and analyze is full of feelings, not data. Now, come to start to think about what are the new models. I mentioned Mazzucato because she powerfully puts her arguments for something what she labels as mission economy. I just want to say, I didn't mention the money in vain. We really have to see what are the fundamentals and what's the big forest. And the big forest is actually, in my opinion, fixing capitalism. And the problem is that actually also the industry that we belong, the industry of research, to some extent inadvertently rather fuels than helps that. And I would say helps meaning to resolve to a new meaning. And I'm not saying that you should become people with the crystal ball and go around with it. But what I'm saying is that actually, really, for me, a lot of the processes that are happening are as well profound opportunity to change how economy works. So when colleagues speak very, very powerfully about basically eradicating the anti-colonialism spirit, I also see an opportunity for a new economy being built. When I still read The Economist and they protest why, I don't know, Chile wants to tax 5% of the profits on their lithium and other industries, I want to learn where those 5 profits will go and whether the government actually there will be successful redistributor of wealth, not to sort of subscribe to a neoliberal economy. What are the specific questions that I want to put to you? Because I see it's more about asking questions. Against this backdrop, the question on think tanks is very important. And I'm afraid that we're still answering with too many ends. My first question is, are the think tanks describers of reality or political players? Many of you will say both, but that's not an answer. Where sometimes where the buck stops. And I can tell you, sometimes if you ask outside, and I apologize for using a pejorative term, some outside world will tell you, are they intellectual playboys, sorry. And I am not going to use any other pejorative terms. Let's stick with the boys. But in the hands of those that are rich and part of the 1% problem. The second thing that I want to ask you is how much there is a sourcing and channeling of knowledge vis-a-vis how much there is a sourcing and channeling of emotions. And again, I'm not asking you to be the manipulators. I'm just asking you to be the analysts as well, if, and you can also dispute this, but if you think that the neuroscience and the digital will make so many big breakthroughs, I think we have to be prepared as a sector rather than catching behind. And last but not least, and that's my favorite because I work for a liberal, democratic-minded foundation, and I deal with this day in and day out, is a dilemma between the educators and influencers. I work with a lot of colleagues who are so ardent and passionate educators. And really, I mean, it's like great to work with them, great to be with them. And then we face the rest of the world. Majority of population doesn't want to be educated, actually rejects. Not because of the knowledge, but because it's like, who you are to educate me. And by the same token, we see the peril, the very same population allows to be influenced by a random, whatever, TikTok channel, YouTube channel, you name it, it's there. And I have to say, instead of moaning, we started thinking, what can we do in an ethically responsible fashion that we are more of an influencers rather than an educators, because I'm afraid there are not enough chakras in today's world to be open as an educational thing. So, coming from the constant change through the real problem of fear and lies in increasing authoritarianism society to maybe a much more positive vision, I really encourage you and myself as well to think about where actually will be the mission of think tanks and where also could be the pitfalls that you will avoid. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Goran. Now we have around 10 minutes, 8 minutes for questions. Mine. If you have a loud voice.
I'll stand. Thank you, thank you. Brilliant, thank you very much for that. It got me thinking about like also connecting this with the first presentation, right? Like with the first speaker. And when you start accepting complexity, you inevitably have to, among many other things, including considering system thinking, etc., you have to think also how much part of the problem you are also. Right? How much you are contributing to the problem by your actions or your inaction. So connecting to that into what you said, I truly think that we cannot avoid, or we should not avoid, by trying to be completely and absolutely objective, forget that in the end, whatever we end up doing is gonna end up probably being political. So we may actually start by acknowledging that. So in that dichotomy that you were suggesting in terms of like being political or being completely objective, right? I guess that we should acknowledge that we are going to be political, but we have to acknowledge also the consequences of that and the possibility of being wrong too, right? And that is what it has to do in how we connect that conversation with uncertainty in particular. Just wanted to put it out there.
Look, very briefly, thank you for coming. It's not a dichotomy. I think all of you, all of us are political, and I don't want to relativize, but the choices that you make are essentially political choices. Now, there has been, and I work for a foundation that has been really riding the wave of democratization, 90s and whatnot. A lot of us convince ourselves that we can be less political and there is something that is objective out there. Look, there will be claims and issues that are really based on data. But when you work with a human being, it's different than when you work with the physical systems. And then, the numbers are also relative. That's why I just want to say, like, embracing political, actually, it's a liberation. If you think about the think tanks that embrace political almost as an ideology, and unfortunately, I would say, the radical right or the right-leaning think tanks are much eager to say that. The liberals are more into the camp. I think that's actually one should embrace and frankly get everybody around them to work with this. So that's why when I say political actor, to me the big issue is like whether you run for office or not. I think that's the conflict of interest. When I was a donor, that was the key thing. Like, okay, let's make sure that we do not give money to someone who runs for office. But whether you have a political standpoint, actually we would like you to have a political standpoint, and you should be transparent about that. I think more and more we'll need to do that. But to be honest, earlier on when you discuss about the networks and whatnot, I also want to see truly global think tanks, not only as a network, but truly global sort of thing. Like Hans spoke very convincingly about Wikipedia earlier today. Imagine if you have like something of a Wikipedia of think tanks, where actually it's not like one sole source of power, but more distributed and then organized in that manner. Interestingly enough, then you could also have an answer to the first challenge of the multipolar world, because you will not need maybe to take sides, as unfortunately many of our politicians will threaten. And I say many of our, including those in democratic world.
So I'd like to go back to where you ended with calling us to rethink our mission, or rethink think tanks' mission, and linking to capitalism. I'm a newbie in the think tank world, so I don't know if it's that original or unpopular, but what if think tanks that are generally non-for-profit turns for-profit organizations? What would be the implications? And I say that because we often talk about intellectual independence, and we think that diversity of funding through institutions is a proxy of independence, but perhaps actually turning for profit really makes us focus on our mission and how to deliver it while adapting to the client. And therefore, there won't be perhaps this issue of taking sides or, threats of our independence. So anyway.
I can take one. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Ivor Chipkin from South Africa. So Goran, we've actually met in Belgrade a few times. I was listening to you, and what I'm hearing you saying, which I think broadly speaking I agree with, but I wanted to throw something back to you, is to recognize the fundamentally political character of think tank work. That we take sides, even if we don't admit it, or sometimes it's not safe enough to admit it. But if you're calling for us to be more explicit in the political character of our work, where are you on the funding side, or to stand with us? Because there have been moments when many of us live and work in dangerous places, or potentially dangerous places, where if we do make our work politically explicit, we open ourselves up to quite severe backlashes potentially, life-threatening, or in all sorts of other ways. Where organizations like yourselves and others, are you prepared to be with us if we play that role? My experience has been that one has been encouraged to act, to enter that space, but when the trouble hits the fan, there's been a backing away from us in those circumstances. So that's my question. I'm throwing it back to you.
One last one, and then...
Thank you. Tamara Suluhian from Georgia. Thank you very much. This was very interesting. You brought up very important points. I'm getting to one of your sort of last propositions. You say educators versus influencers. And I was thinking so basically in today's world, we see cartoons and movies, there is this normal person and suddenly transforms, into some superpower and Superman that can do different things or everything. And are we getting there, or should we still more, conservatively pursue the think tank model that is known for its process and delivery in a very a particular way, that its own comparative advantage rather than getting everywhere. And then if we expect think tanks to become the influencers, then we could probably think of ways. And what do you think about it? We probably are talking about institution rather than personality, because if we're talking about personality, the easiest way would be you are established think tank, there is the established influencer, you get influencer on board, but this influencer may not be a researcher or may get beyond the boundaries of a normal operation. Or otherwise, I mean, is not Chatham House the influencer? If we talk about sort of brand names, right? Because these names speak, right? A Chatham House or Bruegel in Brussels or few others. I don't want to discriminate here. There are many great think tanks, but I think once we have this a global, well-established think tanks, their brand name brings that influence, perhaps, that you meant. So a comment and a question. Could you reflect?
Thank you. So let me start from the educators versus influencers. I mean, look, I can do whatever I want, and I won't be a TikTok star. So whatever videos I make, probably most of you as well. So it's not a suggestion. And I take it as a compliment, okay? With all the respect to TikTok, it's a bit of a different game. Or Instagram to some extent. No, look, it's not for us to become the influencers themselves. It's actually more about what are the routes to make successful change. And you come from Georgia. I happen to know a thing or two about Georgia. When you look at your politicians, you're thinking, oh my goodness, like I can repeat 1,000,000 times, and these people, I can talk to the 3 over here. Probably there will be a bigger chance that the 3 will change an opinion than some of those. And unfortunately, that's like you hit that wall, and then you try and you try. When I'm thinking about the influencers, because politicians, ratings, and whatnot, it's more of how you project this knowledge that you have through the existing people that is happening in a way. If you were, let's say, a company, what you would do through a digital marketing firm, the digital market firm will contract hundreds of influencers who get these product placements, and they contractually are obliged to mention that product in whatever. And the influencers have get the offers for hundreds, if not thousands of products. They choose among them what is also their brand, and then they push it. I'm not saying that you should do that, but I think we have to start thinking, and then suddenly everybody, drinks Coca-Cola. The other thing is, when you saw somebody mentioned their grandmother, everybody smiled and was really, felt like, oh, I can relate to that. And when you think about that, I was like, where is my work in everyday life of an individual? An individual wakes up, goes, to the fridge. Am I there? Or, am I on the road, on the billboard, in the road itself? I'm not saying that it should be every day there, but unfortunately, you're there every 3 months. An average NGO will be every Saturday, and mainly because of protests. Last but not least about this, actually very interesting. I met already a couple of people, and we're even trying to establish contact to see, all these powerful platforms, Netflix and the like. Actually, they see that they can sell pretty well shows on politics, and not only in English language, a lot of others. Actually, they're hiring people smart like you to advise and to make those shows more like reality with analysis. That's also an influence. So what I'm advising you is nobody disputes that reports should be there, but then the afterlife of that knowledge has to be a bit more, if you like, populist, or if you like, a bit more effort to that. Now, coming back to the political character of the work, you're very right. Most funders are very risk averse. I mean, painfully so. And you're right, and then we'll say, oh, great, but I have to distance yourself because my government and all this. Now, I would say first and foremost, you do not need to wear the badge of honor which says, I'm a proud leftist. Like, for example, in Europe, there are a lot of smart leftist ideas, and they're worse advocated by the leftist proponent on them. Because everybody turns the channel or switches off or gets agitated by the way how they. I think it's more about yourself and the people who work to be clear whether you belong or not to some ideology, or whether you're a platform where multiple ideologies are allowed. I remember in its heyday, I don't know whether it's like that today, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a think tank that I was interested to learn more about, was a very good platform where Republicans and Democrats will sit next to each other, debates and whatnot. So actually, they were ideologically sort of balanced because they brought it by the people. But we have to have a clarity about this. To us donors, I have to say there are two fundamental problems. People try to escape from the political, even when it's political with a small p, non-partisan. And I think that's something we have to figure it out. The other issue is that donors who have money, that's also the problem with the richness. They think because they have the money, they're smarter. I mean, take an average person from Silicon Valley, or let me be specific, an average billionaire from Silicon Valley. Do they have the best view on society? Probably not, but they have the money to change it. I'm aware of the time. So I think while we have to think in that way, we have to think also where the politics will be placed, and what does it mean to be political without capital P, meaning partisan, especially in the democratic societies. In authoritarian, where people also operate on fear, it's a harder sell, because there everything is also on the verge of being conspiratorial theory, harder. More important thing about the money, most of the money are channeled through topics, and that's wrong. Why? Because all of you will say, oh, this problem is multidisciplinary, it has to be solved. But what when the money are channeled around topics? So we're also talking about a structural problem here, where the problems are multifaceted while the money go in a single issue problem. And then everything seems like, oh, there should be a network. No, it should be, there is a problem and there's a funding which is tied to that problem. Not there is a climate issue, there is education, there is something like that. Last about the capitalism. Look, it's not, I don't want to sound across like I'm a sort of a radical leftist, although I like some of these ideas. But the damage that you see in real life that capitalism does in order to preserve its wealth, and how the wealth really went up, is already visible, it's palpable, and people see it. And that you get through the protest movements. You get it from many years, and you get it also from the people who do not have. And I think if we embrace that, and we do not say that we have to abolish capitalism, but we have to make it more responsible to the society, it's probably a one step further. I work on the democracy, and I have to tell you, it's impossible to try to help a lot of democratic societies that are struggling, even the affluent ones, because the fundamentals on which they're built, why did they earn this money, what do they do this with money, are flawed. And if that's not corrected, that money inevitably will come back to the system. And unfortunately, most of the time they come back to the system in a more damaging than helpful manner. So you remember I was very careful not to mention the inequality word. I just want to, because probably, I was very careful because I don't want to fall into that narrative. That's one possible way to speak about that, but I really would like to make sure that, you know, I put like all this concentration of money brings power, that brings a lot of authoritarian tendency, and that goes rather through capital. Because if you think about today's world, and that's my concluding thought, what needs to be reformed, capital, if you look at that, money is actually something that is super respected. If you look at that, capital is overvalued. Human capital or human resource or humans, it's undervalued. Always the troubles are, oh, they're fighting for their salaries. And the natural capital is not even valued. You can pollute more or less still in many places without that bringing any damage. That's what I'm talking about, reevaluating the essence in what we do. But sorry, I'm already in your coffee break.